One of the hardest parts of painting a miniature has nothing to do with brushes, colors, or technique. It starts the moment you pick up a model and start worrying about messing it up. So today I want to show you a painting approach where those early mistakes simply don't matter. I began by adding some water into my paint, and before moving on to the model, I gave the brush a quick tap against a paper towel. This ensures that, while my brush is still loaded with paint, any excess moisture gets absorbed, allowing me to work the volumes in a way where the paint doesn't flow around uncontrollably, but instead gets placed exactly where I want to. And I know this looks a bit too diluted, but there's a reason for that, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But for now, where am I focusing this first layer? Well, in reality, nowhere in particular. You see, my goal here is simply to break the ice, and let my intuition guide me through the paint job. It is easy to look at a model and think, oh, this would be a great place for some highlights. Or some shadows here would look interesting. Seeing the opportunities is really the problem, but getting started usually is. So throughout this process, my goal is to show you the imperfect, messy first step, so you can see there really isn't anything magical about it, other than what many would simply call slapping paint around. However, there is a small trick, or maybe more of a safety net, to silence that little voice in your head saying, but what if I mess it up? And it is exactly that extra dilution I gave the paint, to the point where it doesn't even qualify as your typical too thin coats consistency, but something much more transparent. And that's because I don't want to create a massive change right from the start. This first step is all about breaking the ice, getting comfortable with the model's shapes, and if we make mistakes, they simply don't matter yet. So now that we have this very incomplete first layer over a general base coat, what's next? Well, now that I've gone around the model once, I'll move on to adding what we would call the highlights, but this time using a more classic layering technique. This layering will be both brighter and more opaque than the previous one, and for the application I am not worrying about staying within the bounds of that first layer. That one was simply a test run, a sketch, something that, alongside the original base tone, will add a layer of complexity and interest to the undertones behind these lines and scratches I am now passing off as highlights. As a small side note regarding color selection, alongside the guts and gore, I also went for a reddish tone along the extremities, and both it, along with the purplish areas, were highlighted using a warm pinkish gray, helping create that desaturated and healthy color palette. After I was done with these sketchy highlights, I diluted both red and blue paints at roughly 3 parts water to 1 part paint, and applied them wet on wet over the corresponding areas, allowing them to mix wherever they touched. And never underestimate the power of a quick wash of diluted paint, not just for its traditional recessed darkening purpose, but mainly, and for the reason I wanted here, to act as an overall filter, something that indirectly pulls the base tone, the first layer, and those sketchy highlights all together. Yes, those messy highlights are still there. They are still rough, still imperfect, but now they feel like they belong. Once everything was dry, I proceeded to sketch even brighter highlights over the entire model, and at this point I had already built a very clear map of where those highlights should go, which brushstrokes worked and which ones didn't. And when it comes to these highlights, or really any highlights for that matter, focus on what actually matters. The only person truly judging your work is usually yourself, and unless you are painting for competition, don't waste your energy trying to make every single corner perfect. Some areas of a model simply aren't exciting, and they won't be the first thing anyone notices. So don't feel guilty about letting those areas do just enough. Instead, save your effort for the parts that actually make you want to keep painting. The face, the weapon, the focal points, the weird little details that caught your eye in the first place. Because the moment painting starts to feel like a checklist, we stop creating. And this hobby was never meant to be that way. And as a final note, when working on what I'd call a simple paint job, not simple as in boring, but simple as in focused, a model where we let color, texture and mood do most of the heavy lifting, special effects, whether that's rust or in this case blood, can add an incredible amount of character for very little effort. And in this case, I found great success in taking my blood effects and diluting them slightly with water. This still gives me those deep red recesses, but now with enough transparency to let the work underneath remain visible. So instead of covering up the previous layers, it enhances them. And while everything still ends up with that glossy, fresh finish, none of the work underneath goes to waste. I hope you found something useful in today's video. If there is one thing I'd like you to take away, is that those first messy brushstrokes don't have to be perfect. They just have to get you started. Thanks a lot for watching, and feel free to leave any questions down in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.